The West-Penra Papers, the second level of learning. Extraterrestrial Origins and Manipulation. Genesis Paper Number 1, The Ancient Guardians of the Living Library. The original experiment by West-Penra, Tuesday, July 24, 2012, http://westpenra.com. 1. Abstract, an introduction to the Living Library. Long before the peace treaty between Orion and Sirius, a young solar system had cooled down and the planets were ready to be seeded. After some turmoil in the beginning, the planets had finally aligned and found their orbits around their sun. Little did all the star beings in the universe know that this seemingly insignificant new solar system, located in the outskirt of the Milky Way galaxy, right on the ninth passageway in the Orion arm of the galaxy, would be subjected to so much commotion, even to such an extent that there would be very few star races in our galaxy and beyond who weren't aware of our beautiful, blue planet. There is no doubt that planet Earth was selected in an ancient past as one of supposedly 12 planets which were planned to develop into living libraries. This was an idea that spread throughout the universe, and there was a vast agreement that something like this should be done, in order to have everything gathered in just a few places. So, instead of just a few founders or groups or founders contributing to building this library on one of the young planets in this new solar system, a large majority of star races decided to participate. The information in the living library should be encoded to protect its contents from star races who perhaps didn't have the best interests of others in mind. For the rest, Earth, through its own fauna and flora, was supposed to bring higher knowledge to those who sought for it with an open heart. The library was also meant to be a huge pharmacopoeia, a natural drug store. Guardians were then going to be selected to protect this unique planet. These guardians should have the fire and the blood of the Mother Goddess, with the passion to herd and nurture the animals and plants in a world where the lion literally slept with the lamb. We don't know much about from whom the idea of a living library originated, but I think it's safe to assume that the idea came from Orion. There is a lot of evidence pointing towards that our solar system was, and technically still is, Orion property. All we need to do is to look at our mythology to realize that this is the case. The Aryans came first, and the Olympians, the Syrian overlords, came much later, as we shall discover soon. The Aryans were most certainly in charge of the seeding of our solar system. At that time, Earth, or Terra, which I will mainly call her from here on, was orbiting our Sun between Mars and Jupiter, where today's asteroid belt is. Thus, she was further away from the Sun than she is today. Albeit, in general, all planets were closer to the Sun then, so temperature-wise it was probably not much of a difference. She was also many times larger than she is today. Anton Parks even suggests that she was the approximate size of today's Saturn. Earth, when spoken of in these ancient times, was known under many different names, such as Tiamat, Marduk, Maldak, Mulch, and Phaeton, to name a few. Not until much later was Terra destroyed and forced into an orbit closer to the Sun, between today's Mars and Venus, where she still is located. 2. The seeding of the living library. The seeding of Terra, for plants and animals to manifest, took billions of years. After the initial directed panspermia, see panspermia, the founders arrived at Terra, bringing more complicated life forms from all parts of the universe, planted them on this new world and watched them to see how they developed. Genetic libraries were popping up in many different places, both on Terra herself and in other places in the solar system. It has been said that many times during this process, the Queen of Orion herself was visiting the planet, helping with the building of the library. By her side at that time were also her helpers, the Vegans. The Vegans, as discussed in my Level I paper, Human Origins and the Living Library, http://westpenry.com/human-origins and-the-living-library.htm right parenthesis comma later on experimented with genetics to create an intelligent species that could work as guardians of the living library, and in one such attempt, they mixed their own DNA with that of the dinosaurs, creating reptilian hybrids who still were mammals, but appearing reptilian-like. These experiments were later abandoned, but some of the reptilians that people have seen throughout time may very well have been descendants of these previous species, now mostly living underground, or in, for us, inaccessible areas of our planet. The first things which developed on land were rocks and plants. Contrary to what many people think, rocks and plants are sentient beings as well as we are and have memory and a primitive consciousness. In fact, lots of information is stored in stones and bones. Shamans know this and have known for as long as they have existed. This is why they use stones and bones, and plants and herbs, in their rituals, because therein lie much of the answers. The plants feel what you do to, and for, them. If we treat a plant with respect, it communicates back to us, the same thing with stones and bones. By connecting with nature, from which we are coming, we can re-energize ourselves and realign with Terra as an intelligent being. Most people today unfortunately have forgotten how to do this. Also, nature has its own mind expanders, which we are meant to use under controlled forms. Those who rule our world today know this very well and don't want people to try these things and therefore classify such plants and herbs as drugs, telling us they are dangerous and must be outlawed to the extent that those who use them may go to prison. The elite, however, use them extensively behind the scenes and probably laugh at our stupidity when we think they are denying us this important part of the living library in pretense that they care about us. If people start taking mind expanders, they will get answers to some of the mysteries of the universe, and that is something our leaders don't want us to do. And God forbid. We may also find out what they are doing to us behind the scenes. Big no-no. Be open to that. Nature has its own things growing that can help us expand our consciousness, and it's okay to use them as long as we don't abuse them. We are all our own healers, we know how to heal ourselves. The old-time so-called witches, who were nothing else but those who still knew the way of the mother and applied the Aryan religion, understood the plants and all living forms. If we take time and listen to the plants, they symbolically represent different parts of the body. The animals know this too, and they know which plants to eat and what not to eat. They don't pick the wrong plants and get poisoned, they know it instinctively. Once humans start reconnecting to the earth, we will relearn this, too. Now, back to our story. So, after an eon or two, the queen and her helpers came back and created the land animals. Some of the sea creatures were seeded so that they would evolve in a manner that they would seek to leave the oceans and explore land, while others were designed to stay where they were and always be water animals. Others, however, never came from the sea, despite what science tells us. They were seeded on land to begin with. Terra had many who watched over them. The animals themselves were part of that process. Animals are very psychically connected, not only with each other within their species, but with the stars. Many of them look quite like their ancestors from other planets, who are their true founders. Also, if we look at the zodiac, we get a hint of how many of the founders and star visitors of old looked like. Many of them were brought here from elsewhere and are still psychically connected with the star race who created them, or to the stars they were brought from. The Queen put them here for many reasons, but they are also teachers for us humans if we only use our perceptions and look and listen. They say that your pet is your best friend. This is true, but there is much more to it. We teach our pets to behave according to our human norms and think we are their teachers. We are in that sense, but if we don't listen to what the pets are teaching us, we miss out on one of the major purposes why we have them in the first place. The cat family, cats, lions, tigers, etc., are especially here to monitor us. They have direct connections to the stars. We can see how the rulers of old Egypt and other places had cats as pets, or lions in cages close to the palace. The goddess holds the animals dear. She knows they are very clever, in many ways much more clever than humans are today, and they know, for example, that they go on after they die. They can be quite multidimensional. They fear not death, but patiently wait for it when time comes. They don't care about their bodies once they've left it behind. They know it's not working anymore and they just go on. Their instinct tells them that there is nothing to be afraid of. They also don't like destruction, and they don't like evil. They were not made for these things. If their species gets tortured, misused, and abused too much and they can't stand it anymore, they leave our reality. We call them extinct, but they simply understand that we are not worthy them, and they go on living in another probable world, in another dimension, where they are treated more gently. It's our loss, not theirs. They are getting the better deal. One reason the goddess gave us the animals was for us humans to have companions here on Terra. We are the ones to decide whether we want to eat them or not. They don't mind as long as it adds to the quality of life. In our past, the savages knew how to ask the animal for permission before they killed it, and before they ate it, they blessed the food. Some cultures still do, which is exactly what the animals want and need. In our Western cultures, in particular, we treat the animals we eat horribly, like they were dead meat already when they are alive. We don't care about their feelings, their fear and horror from the ways we treat them. For them there is no quality of life. In addition, we get to eat meat that is contaminated with enzymes from a terrified animal who was killed in the most horrifying way anyone can imagine. But here in the West we don't even need to see when this happens. We have people who are paid to torture these animals. The rest of us don't want to know how it's done, we just want to buy them after they're slaughtered, neatly packaged in the grocery store. The animals today are showing us our own pain. It is happening so we can see what we need to do to improve ourselves, and like the Pleiadians say, when you allow forms of animal life to sit in equality to you, then you will be ready to sit in council on the higher planes of existence. When the queen was happy with what she had created, and before she left the second time, she decided to insert a few species that could hold the planet together until she came back and created the intelligent life form that was meant to herd all living creatures on Terra. These creatures were meant to coexist with this future intelligent race as well, and were needed to keep the frequency and the magnetic spectrum within a certain vibration. She needed animal species that could hold the frequencies together with sound vibrations, so she decided to bring in the whales and the dolphins and placed them in the ocean. But not only did she let them exist there. In the great waters of Terra Tiamat, she also let them exist on land and in the air. She allowed them to exist in many dimensions at once. The Mother made them multidimensional, and they have remained such up until this very day. Later on, dolphins and whales also became a natural part of Earth's own fauna. Now, here on Earth, we find dead dolphins float up on the beaches for no obvious reasons, and many whale species are getting extinct. Much of it is because of human foolishness, but neither whales, nor dolphins are stupid animals, they are still smarter than us in many ways. They are consciously starting to leave our reality because it's time for us humans to take stewardship over the planet. These clever animals know that it's a hazard, because humanity certainly doesn't seem to be up to such a task, but now it's really up to us, either way. If we don't make it on our own, we are creating our own demise and can't blame it on somebody else. We are no longer teenagers, we have grown into adulthood, and now it's up to us to show if we can live up to our responsibilities or not. Much more about this later. At one time, for some reason, the founders seem to have left Terra temporarily for several millions of years, attending business elsewhere. That's when the Vegans, perhaps with help from other founders, created the dinosaurs, which Anton Parks calls the Humu. It is suggested by both Lissa Royal and Keith Priest, as well as Anton Parks, that the Humu were created as temporary guardians of the living library while the creator gods were gone. The Vegan experiment, which included mixing their own genes with that of the Humu, happened in a later dinosaur era. According to Royal and Priest, it sounds like the Vegans were the first to come back after millions of years of founder absence. We need to keep in mind here, before we continue, that the original Earth/Terra was much larger, and had a weaker magnetic field. This made all creatures living there much bigger than those of the present Earth. This is why we hear of giants from the ancient past, and of course, both the dinosaurs and the mammals were much larger than they are today. After hundreds of millions of years of giant reptilians dominating the Earth, the Queen sent her Catitude to make changes in the Earth's magnetic field, which included a pole shift. This had the intended effect of letting the dinosaurs die out, they could not survive these drastic changes and is the reason why scientists can't figure out why the dinosaurs went extinct so suddenly, almost overnight, figuratively speaking. It was planned. However, there were dinosaurs who did survive the pole shift and the change in the magnetic field, although the majority died out. And when the dinosaurs diminished in quantity, the mammals could prosper in a less tropical climate. Now it was time to create some intelligent guardians of the living library. 3. Namlu, the creation of an androgynous race. The guardians of Terra and its living library were truly magnificent beings. Some say they were around 13 to 15 feet tall, with slender, almost transparent bodies, long limbs, and big, elongated skulls. Their eyes was large and black as the Khaa, and the whole being emitted an incredible wisdom, compassion, and love. When you looked into their eyes you saw stars, but beyond the stars there was this deep abyss, filled with love and wisdom that could only come from the goddess herself. They were made up of many different star beings' DNA, but foremost that of the Queen of the Stars. She wanted them to be not just ordinary beings, but to have the fire of the goddess and the essence of the Khaa in their bloodstream. She made them truly divine. They were multidimensional by default, and had semi-etheric bodies with a pearly violet rose tint. When their sensitive minds perceived danger or threats, they took on a reddish tint. In their DNA was the secret of the universe, and they were made to serve. The animals, the plants, the rocks, the oceans, the skies, and the ether alike were their home. They could travel freely across the dimensions and were excellent shepherds. If you would have been there, you could have seen these giant humanoids walking the earth, 2 by 2, or 3 by 3, maybe holding long walking sticks, following herds of animals, or you could have seen animals following them and surrounding them. They didn't talk, they had no vocal cords like you and I. Instead they communicated by thought. You could feel their thoughts inside your head when you spoke to them and they replied. Their communication did not always come into one's mind as words, these beings sent their messages in whole concepts, like a whole package of thoughts at once. They were very friendly, and the only time you could hear them was when they made a loud, but pleasant sound, as they were calling back stray animals. The Queen didn't give them genders, because she didn't want the conflict between males and females brought down from the stars to this virginal planet. So she made them androgynous. They had no need to reproduce, they were all created at once, and the Queen calculated how many of them there had to be to fulfill the purpose. And these would be all there would ever be. In the beginning, dinosaurs and humans were walking the planet together, figure 1 to 4. Before the last reptilian giants eventually went extinct because they no longer fit in. Instead, the way it often works, those species just changed dimensions and now exist elsewhere, where the vibration can hold their own frequency. The Queen and her helpers stood there, watching them walking off into the dusk, some with sticks in hand, tall and majestic, followed by animals we would today consider predators and herbivores alike, across the savannah. But no one attacked or ate another, they were not made to do that. They got the nutrition they needed from the light they absorbed when they ate plants, and they got nurtured by the sun as well. These beings always wandered in small groups, each group taking responsibility for a certain area or terrain. The Orion Queen was pleased, very pleased. She and the other founders had created a true paradise. These magnificent guardians of Terra were later being called the Namlu, or simply the Lu. The Queen turned around and looked at the founders, one by one, and she was smiling. The others knew she was very happy about what they all had created. She told them it was finished for now and they had done a fantastic job. Now it was just a matter of finding out if the experiment would be successful or not. It certainly seemed like it would be. Then she turned to her daughters, the few of them who had arrived from the stars on their mother's call. She said to them, "You are lucky, because you are the ones who will be the administrators of this unique world. I am very pleased to give you this assignment. Administrate this world to your absolute best, choose the people you want to work with, and stay here. This will now be your home, too." This was normal procedure, Each world in the Aryan Empire had their own administrators, and they were always the daughters of the queen. They were the ones in charge, while those they choose to work with them were normally the queen's most trusted people. It is my understanding that those who assisted the daughters of the queen were all from one of the planets in the belt of Orion, or from a planet orbiting one of the original stars of the Aryan Empire. In other words, they were of the same species as the queen herself. These administrators, the queen's daughters and their helpers alike, became known under many names. In Anton Park's books they were called the Emotum, but here on Earth they are better known as the Titans. They were giants, just like the Namlu, but had genders. They were both females and males, but the chief administrators were of course females, being the daughters of the queen. The queen turned around, took a last look at her creation and then returned to the stars. This was the last time she was visiting Terra in her embodiment. She never returned in physical, but was continuously looking over her creation in spirit. And her administrators, after all, were just a thought away. This was the beginning of the Golden Age on Earth. 4. The Namlu and the Titans in history, mythology, and tradition. The old men tell that in the beginning of the world, God created a man and gave him responsibility for all the creatures. This man went out every day from his house very early in the morning to visit God's property, that is, all that is found here on the earth. And he would always return home very late in the evening, and very tired. But in spite of his great fatigue, he had to make his report to God on the state of health of all the creatures. Oral tradition of the Lumwi of Zaire. This, to me, describes the Namlu pretty well, albeit they were neither males, nor females. They were the guardians, and their responsibility was to see to that the living library was flourishing and prospering, and when the day was over, they reported back, telepathically, to the Queen of the Stars. This was what they were designed for, this was their passion. They were truly one with nature and in total communication with Mother Terra. The one person who has looked into this primordial human being the deepest is probably Anton Parks. Hence, for the reader's convenience, I am going to paraphrase and cite a few things from his books, which are in French, but an English version can be found here. http://www.zeitlin.net/endenchantment/secrets.html right parenthesis. Parks refers us to the Gnostic texts, Kut. This being was fashioned by the creators, in the image of God, the source, and conforming to their respective appearance. This perfect primordial being combined the various powers with which they, the creators, had been endowed, both physically and psychologically. And Kut. In these days, Terra was not third-dimensional. The Lu, and even the animals, were multidimensional, and to a certain degree, the animals in today's world are multi-D still, and could do and sense things we 3D humans have a hard time with. David Icke is talking about this race as well in one of his recent books. He says, Kut. It seems that before the reptilians arrived there were no men and women, only androgynous humans with many powers and gifts that allowed them to connect with the great beyond. And Kut. He then continues by saying, Kut, what we call humans were not men and women but androgynous male-female beings, as I said earlier, with a genetic structure that allowed them to access, and interact with, a range of densities. They were not physical as we understand it, but much less dense and able to stay in contact with Source, the All That Island. This was the golden age of legend across the world. End Kut. Ick is correct, they were not physical in a way we understand it, their bodies were much less dense. We would see them as half-transparent if we went back in time, maybe like they were made of gel. They were very graceful and very calm. They had no leaders, they worked as a collective and like Parks says, they form a collective community of the first order, a social unity, a single essence. And what about the Titans? Were they really the administrators of the early Terra? In Wikipedia it says that in Greek mythology, the Titans were a primeval race of powerful deities, descendants of Gaia, Earth, and Uranus, Heaven. In the name Uranus we can extract the word an, or Anu, which we know is Aryan, meaning heaven, the Aryan Empire. Wikipedia further tells us that the Titans ruled during the legendary Golden Age. They were immortal giants of incredible strength and stamina. It also tells us that in the first generation there were 12 Titans, the number 12 again. The males were Oceanus, Hyperion, Coeus, Cronus or Cronus, Crius and Iapetus, and the females, the Titanesses, were Mnemosyne, Tethys, Thea, Phoebe, Rhea, and Themis. Then it goes on telling us about the second generation of Titans, where the most famous ones perhaps are males, Eos, Helios, Atlas, and Prometheus. Among the daughters, most have probably heard of Pallas and Persis. Mythology goes that the Titans were overthrown by a race of younger gods called the Olympians, who typically are the Syrian overlords, in the Titanomachy, War of the Titans, a catastrophic event we are going to discuss soon. This, says Wikipedia, represented a mythological paradigm shift that the Greeks may have borrowed from the ancient Near East. These myths about the war in heaven are common, not only in Greece, but also elsewhere in Europe and the Near East. It's also told in Scandinavian mythology about the old Asa gods, and further in the Babylonian Enuma Eli, the Hittite kingship in heaven narratives, and as the rebellion of Lucifer in Christianity. Legend goes that the War of the Titans lasted for 10 years, and according to mythology, while attacked by the Olympians, they retreated to Mount Othrys, a mountain located in central Greece. This is quite interesting, because again our own mythology is telling us the story of how it really was, sometimes in a very straight manner, but more often in metaphors. Nevertheless, the real stories are there for those who are willing to look. I truly believe that if we really want to know what happened in the distant past, some of the best ways to do so are perhaps to interpret ancient scriptures, study earth mythology, and listen to our inner selves, because we are all divine and have all the answers within us. And while on that subject, I find the following, also from Wikipedia, quite telling. Kut, one iteration of this story, that of the late antique Neoplatonist philosopher Olympiodorus, recounted in his commentary of Plato's Phaedrus, affirms that humanity sprang up out of the fatty smoke of the burning Titan corpses. Pindar, Plato, and Oppian refer offhandedly to man's titanic nature. According to them, the body is the titanic part, while soul is the divine part of man. And Kut. This quote is again very close to the truth. We humans, as Homo sapiens, have divine souls in a most unique way, and we have the genetics both from the Namlu and the Titans from Orion. 5. The Golden Age. For millions of years, the Namlu and the Titans lived side by side, in peace and harmony with their environment, and the vibration and the frequency of Terra. This beautiful blue and green world, was very high. Everything was in perfect harmony, in an almost perfect symbiosis. Other friendly star races visited the Earth for years to come, and they were permitted to do so, because this was part of the purpose of the living library. Outside visitors came to get access to the enormous knowledge base that was embedded in nature here, and the Titans and the LU welcomed them and gave them what they needed, if the star race's vibration corresponded with the information they said they needed and wished for. Communication between star systems is permitted, as we know, as long as both parties are in agreement. The Pleiadians agree. Kut, when the universe is functioning in a harmonic, without tyranny, one civilization is free to exchange information with another. End Kut. In the meantime, highly evolved founders created locations elsewhere in the universe where information was being stored. There were also 12 locations here on Terra where clues to where the universal storage places were located in the center of the Milky Way galaxy had been built. Some call these founders the wing makers, and the storage zones they created, both locally here on Earth and in the center of the Milky Way, are sometimes called the tributary zones. This has also been confirmed to me by LPGC. The Pleiadians backs it up further. Kut, the living library is not simply a historical record, it is an entire library of knowledge from which anything can be created. There are formulas and blueprints stored in the life forms on Earth for all kinds of realities to be developed. Other libraries located in various sectors of the universe store their knowledge in light forms or corrections of molecules that you would not even recognize. For each of the 12 centers, the creator gods, the wing makers, authors comment, designed a unique storage method for the knowledge. The intent is to protect the integrity of the libraries, each alive in its own way. From a perspective of the future, the libraries have been lost, and the need for rediscovery and opening is now. Ideally, each of these 12 libraries creates an electromagnetic alliance which houses stupendous shift in realization. The 12 together create the opportunity for a brand new harmonic for all of existence, as you perceive it. End quote. This is obviously describing the 12 tributary zones pretty well, and it was written Indiana 1994, 4 years before the launching of the Wing Makers site. The Wing Makers, however, are talking about 7 zones, but in this universe, things come in 12, often with one overseer in the center, which makes it 13. I wish I could end this series of papers right here with this wonderful picture in my head of an old, lost time of a golden age, but unfortunately I have to move on, because things are about to change drastically. This peace and harmony did not last infinitely. Something very evil was about to change the earth forever, and things would never be the same again. What was about to happen brought an abrupt end to the golden age, and a very dark age followed.